evening. I would like to invite everybody to our government meeting and our vision. But I'm really excited to be here today. We're talking about streets, and there's two things I feel like we've come to a really important part of our stage in Canyon City. One, there was a really long time when it didn't matter what was posted on social media, didn't matter what it was, there would always be a gazillion comments that would say, why don't you fix our streets? And that's not happening nearly as much. They're complaining about other things, but it's not consistently just our streets. And number two is this will be our first meeting to really sit down with you, Leo, our new Public Works Director, and really talk about streets as well, which is something that's really important to us. And we are really proud that we have been fixing streets, and grateful for the time you put in for us to look at our next 3+ year projection. Before we go much farther, we do need to call a roll call, though, please.
Good evening, everyone. Councilmember Dennehy. Councilmember Schmischer.
Here.
Councilmember B. Smith. Councilmember Stein.
Here.
Councilmember Tracy.
Here.
Councilmember Worthington.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick. And Mayor Smith.
Here. All right. Are we just going straight to Leo, or do you have something you'd like to?
No, we can go straight to Leo. He's got a presentation prepared, and yeah, we're talking two-way streets.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and
Oh.
Councilwoman,
Oh, you need to put on your mic on, please.
We're all.
there you go. Good evening, Mayor and Councilwomen. Thank you for having me tonight. I will make two quick notes before I start. We did have a copy of this was included in the packet, and I did have a few things that changed in that time. So what you'll see presented today looks a little bit different. We did manage to also get this document along with a little more detailed version of all the maps loaded to the website today. So anybody watching at home or elsewhere that would like to look at those is free to grab them there. I believe Christy or somebody was going to put a link to that direct in the comments of the live stream, so
Yeah.
we can get to all that information. Because some of the maps don't show up the best in PowerPoint.
Yeah. And all of those updates were emailed to City Council as well.
Oh, thank you. All right. So, thanks for allowing me 6 months to get here and understand a little bit of the history about 2A and what we've done and where we're going. So here is what I've been able to put together so far for the program. Oh, I have to turn this on, Brandon? Maybe I do. What's that? On the side. Got it. My bad. Thank you. All right. Looking backwards, 2017 through 2022, we as a city have invested somewhere around $19 million in construction. Of that, we have already completed just shy of 12 miles of road throughout the city. And those are all highlighted. And like I said, the maps are a little bit easier to see online, but most of those should be really familiar to everybody that's been here. 2023 through 2026, we have previously approved a number of other contracts for things like engineering, surveying, construction contracts for another segment of roads. This segment of roads that's already had some work done on it represents around $11 million additional dollars and just shy of 5 miles of roadway. The segments that are highlighted in orange there are all awarded construction contract projects. So Reynolds at the far east end of town is the only one that's actively under construction at this time. The portion of College Avenue in Franklin will begin later this fall. The yellow portions are a variety of survey to some of them have been fully designed and are just waiting for the opportunity for the funding to fall into place. Point to specifically Harding from 5th to 9th is one that is on the shelf, ready to go. We've just struggled to piece together the water main funding that should go along with that segment, so it's been kind of sitting there waiting for that opportunity. Some of the other ones, like College and the portion of Main and First, are not as far along. We've done the survey and some of the preliminary geotechnical work, but that's about the extent of the investment in those at this time.
I'm sorry, Leo, you may have said, do you want questions as we go?
Oh, yeah. Feel free to interrupt me if there's anything that comes up.
And I don't know if this is the best time, but I didn't see Maine from 7th to 9th on any of these. And it's in pretty rough shape, so to speak, so I just wondered if at
It
some
is,
point you're going to address
it's
that.
one that we submitted that project for a variety of grants. I think prior to my time here, it was submitted for a revitalizing Main Street program along with the 300 block to do bump outs and streetscaping type work there. I believe we only received half the award to do the 300 block at that time. We also submitted it for a TAP grant in the last cycle, and it was one of the projects that was not selected. So it is in rough shape, though. I would agree that those 2 blocks are a primary street that's not in great shape.
I'd just personally like to see it somewhere in the schedule. It's just, it's kind of a standout for Main Street. And I don't know if the parade, when people walk along there for the parade, Blossom Festival or whatever, it's got to be a little tough on them. It's tough on cars. So anyway, just wanted to bring it up.
So financial-wise, between what we've completed and what we have kind of committed or
I
planned.
don't know if you guys can
Oh,
see me. I don't mean to interrupt you, Leo, but I did have a question about the last slide.
yep.
I just wanted to make sure, I know we had quite a bit of conversation during the council meeting with regard to the survey and design for college, but just wanted to, reconfirm again that we are putting sidewalks in on college on both sides as part of this design, given the foot traffic that we're expecting with the kids in particular. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that is definitely our intention with the design. We've, just today, I posed the question to our 2A auditors and our legal counsel to make sure those are eligible expenses for 2A dollars. We've not typically used 2A dollars for sidewalk installation. There are a couple of exceptions. We do ramp upgrades for street crossings that we're federally required to do. Those are our responsibility, and there's no way around that. And we did install new sidewalk along, or we will install new sidewalk along the Reynolds Avenue project where there was none existing. But aside from that, we've not typically previously used 2A dollars to replace existing sidewalk. So there are some exceptions. It's not always been consistently handled. So just to say, we may have to look at alternative funding for the sidewalk portion of that project if that is a priority for us, and we find that 2A is not the best source of funding for that effort.
Yeah, and for further clarification, on the 2A ballot, it's specifically, and it was written by the Citizens Committee, that it could only be used for street reconstruction, period. And that way they didn't want the city hiring more staff or buying special equipment. And so then when it came to sidewalks afterwards, we're like, well, we don't know, are we, this is a little bit of a gray area. Do we stay true to that literal translation? Or do we include sidewalks?
And
And so we've kind of leaned towards being careful and being true to that to keep the trust of the people. But
And I don't know, I'm trying to remember the ballot language specifically. I don't know that it said reconstruction. I think it said street infrastructure, but
oh, okay,
Yeah.
so maybe there is, that's where the gray was, like, well, what's that definition? And so that's kind of where that question mark.
and, some of that may be
And I-
clarified as we move through the multimodal plan and if the city adopts a complete streets ordinance or something along those lines. Those are things to be considered here in the future as well.
Okay.
I want to make sure, though, that we're being as cost-effective and efficient as possible. And I would certainly, Leo, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I would certainly think that including sidewalks in the survey and design work would be much more cost-efficient and effective than doing it separately later. And then also same being true when it comes to actual construction, because you'll have already mobilized in terms of the company that will be going out to do it. So just want to make sure that we have that clarity and that we're providing that before we kind of miss the window, particularly on a street that is as important as College when it comes to foot traffic. Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, and you're correct. It definitely is the most efficient and appropriate time to add it while everything else is ongoing. So. All right. Back here. So where we project we'll end 2022 is with around a $6 million balance in the 2A account. The 3-year average revenue for the account is around 4.5 million, meaning that between 2023 and 2026, we'll have roughly $24.3 million to allocate towards this program. If we're to uphold all of the existing committed projects, that represents around $11 million. Setting some aside for the engineering, survey, geotechnical work, and the remainder of our debt service leaves us around $8.5 million to kind of allocate towards construction projects that have not been already approved in any phase. So with that in mind, here is my attempt at expending part of that $8.4 million. We focused primarily on arterial and collector streets, actually entirely on arterial and collector streets. Some of these projects are familiar, have been discussed as 2A projects for a very long time. I know 9th Street in particular has been one that has been on almost every list I've seen. I believe Griffin as well has been on there. A couple of them were new, and we'll talk about those. I'd like to look at a portion of 5th Street in the northern end of town from Fairview up to High, as well as Harrison in the old city core, potentially Central Avenue as well from 15th east to the city limits. So I think what I did is I kind of split these down by year, and I'll show you a little later what the full year program would be. What I'd like to look at for 2023 is including the sections of 5th and Harrison. The work I'm proposing for these segments of roads would be classified as a heavy maintenance rather than a reconstruction. This would not be a full rip this road out down to the gravel and rebuild it from the ground up. This would be grinding off the surface of that road and resurfacing the asphalt. It kind of slots in between a chip seal and a full reconstruct as a type project. These will typically, if applied in the right area, will give you, a 10 to 15 year pavement life of that roadway, as opposed to a reconstruct being 30 years or better. They require little to work to the curb and gutter, other than what we previously talked about as far as making the sidewalk intersection upgrades for ADA compliance. They, being a smaller investment with a longer or a shorter life cycle, it does kind of put less emphasis on the need to replace all of the underground utilities. If you're investing in a 30-year plus road, it makes sense to make sure that everything under that road is in good shape. But if you're investing in 10 years of extended road life or 15 years, it becomes less critical to do that. The cost for these is substantially less. Obviously, the time frame to complete the work is very quick. Goes from a matter of months to a matter of weeks in most cases. And there are some economies of scale. We have a few other projects that are proposed for similar type repairs around town. We have a contribution from the Loves development that was to repair the portion of 4 Mile Parkway in the similar fashion. And we also have a general fund allocation for street resurfacing projects that we were looking to use on a couple of local streets for a similar type fix. The one thing I will note on this is our city standard specs have a provision for a surface damage restoration fee. So if your water line breaks or your sewer lateral breaks and you have to cut the road open, the city charges a pretty hefty fee for damaging a new roadway. I think we would want to consider altering that fee in light of the fact that we're also not going to be investing in new water main at this time for these roads. So we wouldn't want to penalize somebody if they had to replace their sewer at the same time. So it would be something to consider if we chose to go this route. Yes?
Yeah, when you mentioned utilities under the streets, I didn't hear you mention, I could have missed, is Atmos Energy gas lines, is that the only other non-city utility that becomes an issue with these?
The sanitation district is in a lot of
Right.
places. I think they are underneath 5th Street, but I believe in the Harrison area, they're all in the alleys in that part of town, I believe.
So from Atmos Energy and from the sanitation district, in what way do you get periodic updates from them where they're saying, we think we're going to have to go after this line in the next 2 years or whatever? How does that
We
work?
got there's a slide a little bit later on. We presented this concept to all of them. Sanitation district had some comments, and that's one of the things you'll you'll note that's changed is they asked for a couple of projects to get changed from year to year to better fit their CIP. I did not get a response from Atmos. I provided it to them, but I will have to follow up with them again. They had never provided me comments on it. We also solicited an opinion from Black Hills, the electric company, although they usually have quite a bit less involvement in these projects, you know, sometimes a few poles or things like that, but.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Another new project. This is one that the sanitation district did have a lot to say about, and I'll end on that. Central from 15th to Drake is an arterial. It's one of the few arterials we've not touched in a long time in the city, and I don't know that we had any great plans to in the near future. I'd like to look at that one for a similar fix. I think building it out to a full city street would be a really heavy lift at this point in time. It is a city arterial street, but it is not a fully urbanized setting along the street. There's still a lot of land and areas and things to be developed, but it is a very busy traffic corridor in terms of the city. You know, I personally have seen that one as one of the busiest streets, if not the busiest local street at times in the city.
I have a question about Central. On
Yeah.
the map, I couldn't tell if there's a certain segment of Central where it's not city on the north side of the street, and does that impact what the city does?
The city's responsible for the roadway. We receive the tax
Roadway,
dollars
okay.
and we're responsible for the maintenance of it, but there are some segments where the city limits are actually the center line of the roadway. But yes, we're responsible to maintain the roadway and have accepted that and received the little bit of tax dollars we get from the state for that portion.
Okay, so even if the line is in the middle, the city still does the whole?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, in my written administrator reports for the council meetings, there are some updates from Patrick regarding an IGA with the county. We're working on addressing those issues where the right-of-way is split, or right-of-way is split between the city and the county. So as we move forward, we actually had a meeting earlier today about that internally, and a meeting here in the next couple of weeks with the county. So we are working on addressing those issues where they come up within the city limits.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, I have a question. It says no sidewalks planned, but that's going to be revisited. That is a very dangerous road. If you, we drive it all the time going from one side of town to the other. And especially at dusk or in the morning, so many people have to walk. They don't have transportation. A lot of those neighborhoods and the trailer parks that are along there. And so there's no bike path. And the road itself is so narrow, there's no room, because people who are riding bikes or trying to walk their dogs in the morning or walk, you know, to go to work, there's just, is there some way we could just, if we find some source that we could use for funding sidewalks? I know AARP has all kinds of grants for walkability in communities, and that's something we might be able to look at, but it just seems to me, when I first moved here, it was terrifying. You're afraid you're going to run over some poor lady walking her dogs, because there's no extra space. The width of is it just me, or is that highway really tight?
It feels like an old county road. It's
Yeah.
probably just 22-foot wide with gravel shoulders. I think I had at least proposed to put some paved shoulders on it with edge lines. That's not the greatest place for pedestrians and bikes, obviously, but it's a step. One of the things that corridor has, it's got a narrow right-of-way in places where we don't have a lot of property in some of those segments, especially the parts that haven't developed. They haven't developed, so we haven't had the opportunity to have those discussions about dedicating additional right-of-way. But yeah, I think the multimodal plan would definitely take a look at that. I could see that as a pretty viable east-west multimodal plan corridor that, I don't know what that study will say, but it's going to have some connectivity east-west, and that's probably the best route for it. Nothing else connects through town east-west quite
Right.
like Harding and Central do. So.
Exactly, yeah, that's, everybody uses that, even the walkers. So, yeah, that's something we need to think of. Thank you.
I think as we move into the multimodal project and start having that public engagement, we'll really encourage the public to come out and provide that type of feedback to us as we're going through that process.
If we were to put sidewalks in Central, though, we would also need to pipe the ditch, wouldn't we?
We would probably be in a similar situation where we have to enclose the ditch laterals along there and add curb and gutter and those type of things. So it kind of spirals into a much more expensive project when you do it that way, and this was meant to strike a balance between getting it improved from, you know, just a 22-foot wide county road to something short of a standard city street. But again, I'll mention the sanitation district had some concerns with this project that they brought up after the original presentation. They would eventually like to replace all of the sewer underneath Central Avenue in this entire corridor, and there's no feasible way they would be able to do that ahead of our project. So we would either be accepting that they may disturb the new road we put in at some point when they come to do that, or we could look for alternative projects to substitute in place of Central Avenue.
What's their timeline?
Their timeline would not be in the next 10 years. I don't believe it's
Not
even
in the
on
next 10
their
years.
5-year capital plan, so it's
So
further
if we
out.
just did the 2-inch overlay, that's only a 10 to 15-year thing anyways, right?
Correct, yeah.
So at that point, you'd almost say like, well, can you wait 15 to 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the alternative is, do we want to wait 10 years to do anything on Central while we wait for, you know, just to wait for the sewer to get done, you know? Can we live with Central like it is for 10 more years, or should we try to find something in between? That was the struggle, you know, I kind of had when thinking about that project. But trying to be mindful of everybody else's needs too, it's tough. Last two projects, I think shouldn't be any surprise to anybody. This is 9th and Griffin. These are gonna be more traditional to full reconstruct type projects. Both of these projects have extensive water, stormwater, sanitation district needs. So we did push these out to later years for that reason. And I don't know if the next slide gets into it, but we definitely cover it in the future. We've got some ideas for ways to finance the water infrastructure work that is needed on the city side. The stormwater is still a little bit of a questionable area for us at this time. And then the sanitation district, you know, pushing these to 2026 helps them. They don't have anything on 9th Street in particular, but I think they have the entirety of Griffin to redo with theirs. All right, I'll slide through these next ones really quick. This is 2023. The top 5 segments are projects that have already been awarded for construction. The bottom 2 are the 2 new ones for 5th and Harrison. And I think we have a budget amendment on the agenda potentially for early August. So if we wanted to go ahead with these, we would need to make a small budget amendment to our current 2023 2A program budget, if I'm correct. I think we have $6 million allocated in there, and the construction costs plus expected engineering and those fees probably push that closer to, I think it was $6.8 million.
Depending on the feedback that we get tonight, you know, we can do these 2-inch overlay projects still this year if we do a budget amendment.
Yeah, we could definitely get a contract out and let. Some of the construction pieces might slip into the early part of 2024, but we would get started yet this year. All right. 2024, this one does look a little different than what was in the original packet. This was, we swapped 2 projects at the request of the sanitation district. They felt that they could get the portion of Pear Avenue ready by 2024, but the portion of 12th and Sherman that was originally in 2024, they would not be able to get that done ahead of 2024 construction. So they were very similar projects in scope and cost-wise from our perspective for both the street and the water main portion. So making the switch was not a huge detriment to us and didn't unbalance anything else too much either. Council member Schmischer, you have a hand up? Trying to catch you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Director Evans. Could you just explain again why we would be considering local streets when we have so many streets with that are arterial and collector that have so much traffic on them that are failed? Like, why at this point are we still looking at doing local streets in the out years? Thanks.
Absolutely. I can say this section of Pear had some work already invested in it and had been approved for design and survey expenses previously. I'll also note that this section of Pear is classified as a local in our terms, while the street, the east-west street just to the south of it, Cherry Street, is classified as a collector currently. Pear Street, in my estimation, probably functions more as a collector than Cherry Street does. It has better east-west connectivity in that it goes all the way from 19th to Reynolds rather than just from Orchard to Reynolds. Pear also only has one stop on it, which I think is at Orchard, while Cherry stops at a number of the other small local streets. So our classification maybe doesn't match the actual use of that street in some ways, I think would be a fair estimation.
Yeah, I think another piece of that is, the needs of what's under the streets. So, you look at arterials and collectors. Had we not received ARPA funds, we never would have been able to do Reynolds, which is a very large, street for traffic. So, when we were proposing this under the previous Public Works Director, we were looking at streets that either had already had work done underneath or did not need additional, under the street infrastructure, and that's why it was proposed.
Thank you. That's really helpful to know about the realities of Pear versus kind of the classification. Thanks.
Yep. All right, 2025, all of these proposed projects have already had some level of, discussion and commitment here from the council. 12th and Sherman have only really been through a survey at this point. We haven't done any design on them. Harding, I mentioned earlier, we have done quite a bit of the design work on that. It's just been a struggle to find the water main funding to make that a whole project. And then College Avenue is similar to 12th and Sherman in that we've only really started to do the survey and the geotechnical work and not any detailed design. And lastly was 26. Those were the two new ones, 9th and Griffin, the entirety of 9th Street. And then Griffin from 4th to 9th is the only portion that's a collector. I think it drops to being a local as you work further to the west. All right, so to try to be holistic with the previous discussions, I did include the list at the top was a list of projects that I had found that I believe was presented previously for consideration during the 2021 or 2022 discussions. I was not recommending any of those at this time, but I did want to make sure we at least acknowledge that they had been discussed previously. To your point, Councilmember Schmischer, most of them are local streets with the exception of Cottonwood. I did also do some work within Cartograph to identify other sections of arterial and collector streets that were, at least 2 blocks long. I tried to stick to those that maybe could be projects to consider if we wanted to, if one of these falls off for some reason or we decide to go a different direction. So like I said, Cherry, I think we talked about County Road 123 would be, that's a big project, and there is absolutely no utility work needed on it, so that would be a relatively easier one in terms of, we could pay the street cost with 2A and not have to worry about waiting for a sanitation district or, the water main funding to fall into place.
I have a question, Leah, on that
Yeah.
first grid. I'm not clear where Cottonwood extends to. It says East Main and then south.
Yep, well, it probably dead ends at Fowler, but it may go to the city limits and then dead end. I'd have to look at a map.
But we are talking south.
It's south of
the
East Main.
highway.
It's the piece that goes south of East Main, and then it connects to Fowler and Riverwood, or Riverview are all three in that same area. Yeah. I did not include Main Street on here, the one that you mentioned earlier from the 700 to 900 block, just because we had pursued so many other funding sources for that. It felt like the type of project that was going to find another funding source in terms of TAP or streetscape dollars that would be a better fit for it. But that could be another one to consider as well.
I think I'd like to see it on the list at least, so that it stays on our radar. so that even if it doesn't get funding, that it can still be a top priority, because it is really bad.
Yeah, it's
and
on,
It's
you
a
know,
really important street.
when
in
you get the
town.
last piece of Main at the west end of town done, it'll feel even worse when you've got just 2 blocks
Yeah.
in the middle of everything else that's in good shape. So we can definitely add that to the list and republish this out.
Looks like Councilmember
Just one-
Smisher, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Administrator Stevens. Just one question on the bottom grid, and then just for clarification, South Cottonwood, I think, is just those 2 blocks between East Main and Fowler. Question on the bottom grid, I saw First Street as an arterial. Could you talk a little bit about why that wasn't prioritized? Thanks.
Sure. First Street from New York to US 50 is not in as poor of condition as many of the other streets we're recommending, so it was a matter of its existing condition is not as badly degraded as the other streets. It certainly would not be a bad street to work on, and I wouldn't recommend it in the first year, but 2 or 3 years from now, as it continues to see age and wear and tear, it certainly could be one to add in. I think the next slide talks about a real high-level engineering-made cash flow analysis for the 2A fund that a finance director would probably hate, but there is a little bit of invariability in there. So that certainly, these later years are going to be things that might change and might adjust. And we'll probably have to have this discussion at least once a year for the next couple of years as we continue to look at these and make sure we're still trending where we want to trend.
Thank you. So just for clarity's sake, that first between New York and US 50 is considered a failed street. It's just not as badly failed as some of the others.
Yeah,
Is that right?
that's correct. The OCI is a little tricky. We did a lot of ratings in the mid-2010s, and then a lot of them have just kind of followed a standard regression scale. So when you look at them now, they show as a 0 maybe, but if you were to go truly re-rate them in a current sense, they probably would not rate out as a 0. So.
Thank you. That's helpful.
All right, so the engineer-made cash flow projection, this is based on the projects that I proposed. So this kind of goes back to one of those earlier slides where we show a ending balance in 2022 of about $5.9 million and expected revenue of around $4.7 million a year. We break out construction contract costs, and then we've got kind of placeholders for survey and engineering and debt service expenses. But that just shows how we would, in a big sense, intend to spend down these dollars by the time we got to 2026, or the end of 2026. I will say the cost estimates for all these projects are based on the bids that we've received for 2023. And then we add a contingency amount to them, and we add inflationary costs for the later years. So if a project is proposed in 2026, it's got 3 years of 3% inflation added on to the 2023 prices. So those things always change. Some years are worse than 3%, some are better. Right now I think we're currently higher, but trending downward. So we'll see how those shape out. But that's just another reason to have this discussion at least annually, make sure we're tracking.
And I would say that those are conservative estimates on the revenue. We've seen that number trending up also for inflationary purposes. So there may be a little bit extra money there at the end to do some additional projects.
I'd say it's almost $1 million more in revenue today than we were receiving when we first passed the tax.
Yeah, I think when it was passed, it was about $3.5 million a year. Now we're closer to $5 million. So it's gone up about $1.5 million since when it was originally passed.
All right, so to speak to all the other impacts that these projects would have, the water fund in particular has some heavy lifting to do in the later years. 2023 has no real impacts to the water fund aside from what we've already budgeted and completed on Reynolds and Perrin Fields. Those new projects on 5th and Harrison have very little impact. 2024 has just shy of $500,000. I believe that's entirely on Pear, I'm sorry. On Pear, we switched those. 2025 is where we start to really rack up our expenses in the water fund in the terms of $2.5 to $3 million in the next couple of years. And that's primarily driven by College Avenue from 9th to 15th, which is all older 4-inch cast iron main. And that also includes the portion of Harding from 5th to 9th. I think those are the only two in that year. And then 2026 includes all new water main on 9th Street from Mystic north to the pump station at Meadows, and then from Meadows north, it's newer water main, and all new water main in Griffin. So I mentioned we've had a little bit of luck finding a potential route forward in the water main funding avenue. The State Department of Public Health and Environment offers a federal program called the Drinking Water Revolving Fund. If you're familiar with the bipartisan infrastructure law or the IIJA federal dollars, most of those federal dollars that are dedicated towards water infrastructure flow through this program. So the way it's structured in Colorado is that if we choose to enroll in this program, we can do up to $10 million worth of work with them, and they treat it as a $10 million loan, and then when the loan closes, they forgive half of it. So essentially, we're left to pay the debt service on $5 million. $5 million is the cap. If we decided that we only wanted to do, $3 million, they would forgive 50% of that at the close of it. It's a long process. It's very drawn out, lots of applications. The finance director will not like it. We've got to get credit ratings and bond counsels and all those good things, which is why we pushed the projects with those needs out to the later years of 25 and 26 if we decide to go this route. But it is a good program. I worked within it quite a bit in my previous roles. It's structured a little bit different in different states, but it's the same scenario. You take a long-term loan. They offer pretty good interest rates. I think they were only 3% to 3.25% right now, whereas anybody else that's loaning money is 5 or 6%. So it's certainly something worth considering if those are still the projects of priority and replacing that water main is of interest. I will also note, just because Travis is here, our water distribution has been trying to keep up with 2A for a long time, and it's not that those are bad projects, but they're not always hitting the projects that are the highest maintenance need for our water distribution system. So if we chose to enroll in this program, this would free up, we could potentially go as high as $10 million and look at, what that debt service schedule is on $5 million, but we could try to tackle some of those other water priorities that have languished a little bit and not been able to receive the attention they need while we focused on making sure we were making good 2A investments. So.
Does that fund have any particular requirements, or do they prioritize certain mains over others, or are there things that would help us or hurt us?
No, they will essentially fund replacement of any main that's of a certain age and condition and has maintenance issues. I think we submitted an initial request to them just to make sure we were eligible for the program and see what the forgiveness terms were. We submitted 9th Street, College Avenue, Harding, Griffin, and we submitted Rudd Avenue, which is a water department priority project from 3rd to 14th, and they were all eligible. It's federal program, so it comes with those requirements. We have to do Buy America for all the iron and steel. We have to make sure we're tracking and paying prevailing wages. You've got to go through some different bid processes. So like I said, it takes more time to get through, but it's hard to also turn down the terms that they offer when
Right.
you can get a lot more done for not a lot of money. And I think the debt service, I did the math on it once. It was $350,000 to $400,000 a year of debt service, I want to say. I don't even know that we would need to raise rates substantially to keep up with that level, but that whole rate study process is part of the program. They force you to do a rate study and host a public hearing and say, hey, if we do this program, we have to raise rates 5% for the next 3 years, whatever that is. I don't think it would be anywhere near that. But
As we're planning for the water master plan, Leo, some of the work that we're doing in the water master plan, does that align with some of the work and things that they're asking for
Yeah, we haven't finalized that yet, but I believe our RFP would include a rate study. So we would be gathering a lot of the baseline data they would need, and it would set up nicely to do those things in parallel.
When you say that the funding is slow and time-consuming, like how slow?
I think in our initial meeting with CDPHE, we expected that we would get bond proceeds in like January of 2025 at the earliest would be when we could turn in our final design plans and, essentially sell bonds to start making revenue. We would incur costs up front. That's a point to make. We would have to pay for design engineering and all those type of things. They're eligible through the program, but the city would have to cash flow those until such time that our bonds closed, and then we could be reimbursed for those costs, so.
I have a quick question. This is kind of related to you, Travis. With the new water infrastructure that all has to be put in, is a lot of these roads will have to be torn up with what's underneath? I mean, just something before we do some of these roads, if we're gonna tear them up for the infrastructure, with the infrastructure that you discussed. I'm just, to me, it seems if we're gonna be doing, and there's a time frame on that you said that would have to be, but, I just wanna make sure that we're not taking this water deal and then having to go tear up our, new road.
I think that's what we're talking about is,
Right.
going after this program so we can put the water infrastructure in before we do these
Yeah,
streets.
that's totally so we can build new
Yep.
roads.
I guess my other question then is from each individual house, if by chance that has to go from the, from the street in, from the water, does that work then come from the, the manhole, whatever you want to call it, out in the street? Can you work to put a new pipe to the house, or do you still have to cut through we have to cut through the street? I mean, I would think that you could pull the pipe up, out, push back in. I don't know. I'm just
You have to
asking.
cut in the street to make the connection to the water main, to put a corporation or a saddle on the water
Okay.
main you do, for a service line. Generally, if we would bury a new water main in the street, so say 9th Street or Griffin, and we put a new water main in, we would run a new service from that main out to the house.
Okay.
So there would be no need to dig up any of those streets in the future.
Okay, that's what I was, okay.
Well, well, this is a little bit off subject, but if it was a brand-new street and there was a new house getting built and they cut into the street, then it could be a substantial cost.
Correct.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we ran across any vacant lots, I don't know if we stub out service lines now so people don't have to cut into them later. I don't know that it's come up anywhere in the little bit of time I've been here.
No, we haven't
Well-
in the past, but we certainly can.
No, there's a house getting built on Forge Avenue, or it might be Evelyn, that wanted to cut into this street. There's a new build, and it was going to cost a ridiculous amount of money to cut into that street. And so
Yeah.
they're.
I mean,
going
there
to
was,
offer
there's been things in the past when people know they're about to build. Orchard was an example of that. When they were going to put those duplexes in, we had them pay, I think it was half for the 1.5 inch or something like that. So we knew that they were invested in it, and then we went ahead and stubbed out 1.5 inch tap for them. So we've done things like that in the past, but it was more when people knew they were about to build, and we kind of gave them the heads up. If you're about to build, it's a good idea to do it now.
We do send letters out to everybody prior to construction too, just to make sure they're thinking about their sewer mains and their water services and those things ahead of time, so that they can try to do that in conjunction or ahead of our project, rather than being stuck with those surface damage restoration fees on the back end. I think Amy had a question online.
Thanks so much. I was wondering if you could talk through for us, if we assumed $5 million in 20-year low-interest debt, how much would we be looking at in a yearly payment? Is that something that could be absorbed by the current water fund? Would that lead to an additional increase in water rates? And what would be the ripple effects for the water consumers in Canyon for this type of project? Thanks. Or this type of investment? Thanks.
Ran the numbers roughly on my computer before this. I didn't include them in here. I believe the debt service would be around $350,000 a year on that 20-year at the interest rates they had quoted us at that time. That would be if we took the full $5 million of loan value, $350,000. I couldn't say for sure what impact that would have on the water fund, but I can say, going through the process, we would have to do that exact study and host a public hearing prior to committing to do this, where we would essentially say, this will require whatever rate increases that may be, or maybe no rate increases. If, if it happens to time out that some of our other debt drops off the books at the time this comes on, a lot of those things get factored into it. But I couldn't tell you what it would be right now.
Well, and I think it is worth noting that, or remembering that, we'd also be getting the $5 million forgiveness. So, that is saving the ratepayers money on the tail end as well. I mean, we would not be raising rates to perform that amount of work.
Travis, do you know offhand when some of the water fund's debt services will be retired?
I don't, but I think we have another, I don't. It would be a rough guess.
Maybe we can add a little bit of information to this slide,
Yeah,
since we're
you're
making
talking
some
to the-
other updates. I can include an estimation of the debt service, and then kind of what our current debt is in the water fund and what the remaining schedule that is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
and you're talking
overall
the COPs,
percentage.
correct? The debt service that we
Yeah.
currently have, yeah.
And the overall percentage out of that water fund, how much is debt versus
Sure.
solvency?
Thank you. That would be really helpful.
It looks like the debt that we owe within the water fund expires in November of 2032.
That's still a
Of
ways
20
out
what?
then.
32.
32, that's the
Yeah.
earliest retirement?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
because it was just renewed not too long ago, a handful of years ago, maybe
Okay.
10.
So we also might need a calculation to review the budget to see if we would need to, I mean, water rates are probably gonna have to rise. What kind of numbers are we looking at potentially?
As far as how much we would have to raise water
Yeah,
rates?
at least if we, for the $350,000 debt service.
Yeah, I don't have that.
We could
We
do-
don't know
we
right
could
now,
do
but
something.
if we
Yeah.
could get some sort of
Absolutely.
rough numbers. So we can
I'll make
have a
some notes
ballpark.
and we'll add that to that slide and repost it once we get it all set and let everybody
And the
know.
water study is probably going to recommend additional hikes in the water rates just for basic stuff too, so it's.
It probably will, but I think
be a
that's,
double
having the forethought to think about this program as we're doing the water study will help inform some of those decisions.
That's true. And I'm actually really grateful that you found this, because for years, we've been saying, sorry, we can't fix any streets because we can't afford to do the water mains. And we're like, we've got to figure out a way to fix these water mains, especially because there's so many that are so old. And now there's a viable option, so we really appreciate that.
I should have started with the other side, because that was the good news, because this one is the one that's not so good news.
Yeah.
I don't have any great answers for the stormwater fund. A couple of those projects in later years would be really great projects to include some storm sewer on, in particular Griffin Avenue and 9th Street from Mystic North would be great projects. I think I would also, if there was a way to feasibly do it, College Avenue would be a good project to have some storm sewer on. We get some overflows of the ditch there by Yale and the high school, and a little bit of flooding there. That would be nice to have if it's not a system to carry the full capacity, at least a mains to get it drained in a reasonable amount of time. I do not have any good avenues for this. There are similar programs, but they don't offer the same forgiveness rates and, those type of grant things. They're really structured through FEMA as long-term loan programs. The interest rates are lower than sometimes you can get with just a standard COP, but not always. And the stormwater fund already, I think I did the math on that one. I think roughly 33% of our current budget is just servicing the debt we have right now, which is only 2 or 3, 4 years old, maybe, not too old. So it's got quite a while till that drops off. This, probably not a popular thing, but the stormwater rates could be raised. You could look at general fund transfers. We can continue to pursue one-time grants. We can say, hey, it would have been a great idea, but it's just not going to work this time, and go ahead with the project without the storm sewer. So luckily, those projects with the higher need are a little bit further out, so we've got time to keep kicking this around. I know I engaged with, I'm going to blank on her name, Beth from
Beth
the
Lenz.
Upper Ark. She's their grant writer, so she's actively helping me look to see what kind of programs we could get for this. Yeah, so we're hoping that something's out there for it to help fill this gap, but we've got a little bit of time to figure it out too.
Ryan, do you know when the debt retires for the stormwater bonds that we got a couple of years ago?
December of 38.
They
December
were 20
38?
year.
And that was for, what, 8 million, or? And do we know what that annual payment is?
I think showing in the budget, 6.2 was the remaining balance, and looks like the annual payment is about 560.
560?
Yes.
That was a really big investment that we made a couple of years ago. Yeah, will the water rate study cover stormwater as well? Or is
No,
it just
it
water?
is just the water.
Although I think it was recommended on that last study that it needed to be incremented a little bit every single year as well, just to keep up with just some of the basic services and smaller projects. Okay.
We already kind of covered this. This was just to remind me that we had talked or tried to reach out to all of our other partners on these projects. Sanitation District had the most input for us. And like I said, Central Avenue was their real focus. They felt like they could do what they needed to do to accommodate all these other projects. But Central was the one that, they weren't going to be able to get everything they wanted to do done ahead of us. So we have to decide if that's, if that project is a priority for us and we're willing to let them do what they need to do 10 years from now, or we could pivot and try to pick some other projects that wouldn't impact them as much. I did not go through the list of all the alternative projects with them to kind of identify what they might have with those. I know County Road 123 is all relatively new infrastructure, so that would be one for sure. That could be pulled up if we decided to switch away from Central or any other project, really. Black Hills had no concerns, and I said I'll follow up with Atmos again. They had not responded as the time I finalized this presentation or since then. And lastly, if everything were to fall into place just how we drew it up with everything that's done, everything that's committed, and everything that's planned, this is about where you would end at the end of 2026. Somewhere near $40 million invested, around 21 and a half miles of roadway improved. You'll note that most of that is arterial and collector. There have been a few pieces of local included in there. We as a city as a whole, I just kind of included those mileages that represent all of the city streets we maintain, so you get a perspective of how much we did. 120 miles. Arterial is, like I said, we've done really well on arterial. The entirety of County Road 3A in Royal Gorge Park is actually an arterial, even though the southern portion of the bridge is not really accessible or used that much. That counts as an arterial for us. And I do, like I said, this map is online. I did bring a printed copy if anybody wants to get a little closer. I know it's hard to make out on the presentation.
And just to be clear, for the public, we're only using 2A funds within the city limits.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Oh, Amy has her hand up.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Leo, I just had a question about, you mentioned 3A. Have we completely redone 3A in recent years?
No, I was just noting that the entirety of 3A is actually an arterial road. It's classified as an arterial. So where I say we have 18.3 miles of arterial as a city, 3.1 miles of that is just County Road 3A.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. I was like, 3A is in really bad condition. I really hope that we have not completely redone it recently. Thanks so much for that clarification.
Yep.
Well, we do need to have a plan for 3A. The 2 is bad. But I'd also like to keep in the conversation, because it's in kind of the same realm, our ditch crossings, because we set aside money every year for ditch crossings. We did have a meeting with a bunch of folks in the hydraulic ditch about 8th and Pine, which is a really big problem. We said that we were going to look at some design work and get something on the calendar? Is that something that's still moving forward?
We were able to complete a site survey of that crossing ahead of the ditch coming on, so we did get that data collected. I know Travis met with Manny from the hydraulic ditch earlier this week and talked about that. We had offered our survey to the hydraulic ditch company's engineer. They had wanted to evaluate the option for piping the ditch through that section rather than building a concrete box culvert. And he had offered their engineer to do that analysis and see what kind of pipe could fit through there and what that would look like as an alternative. And I don't think he's had a chance to kind of move that forward yet from that point. So we still
Okay.
are proposing the ditch crossing money in next year's budget. And as far as I've seen, that's probably our top priority in terms of road crossings over ditches.
Okay, yes, that's a really important one. But I also want to put on the radar the Douglas Alley too. Have we had any opportunities to move forward with some more studies on that?
We presented an offer back to the group that was involved with the Douglas Alley to essentially have them partner with us on that lateral replacement. I don't think we've gotten an answer back from them yet on it, though, so.
Okay.
We
Okay.
moved the info back to them and gave them some information to think about and decide how they wanted to go forward.
Okay. Yeah, if I could be kept in the loop on both of those, just so I can know that there's checks being made, since I was involved in those initial discussions. But thank you. I'm really glad there were a lot of really frustrating years where the ditch crossing money just kept getting revolved. And I really love seeing it actually being applied to a project.
Yeah, and any of that was not used this year, we will roll over till next year's budget.
And use it. I want to spend it.
All right, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about and just really highlight how great 2A has been for this town. This map, which is, I don't think I printed a copy or put this one online, but I can. This shows what we've been able to invest as a city in terms of just general fund dollars into street maintenance capital projects. So if you look at the map, it looks like a lot of miles of road. A lot of that is chip seal. So looking at just the dollars that we've been able to invest over the same time period that 2A will put, $20 million into the road, we've been able to, on our own, invest about $3.5 million in that range. And of note of that is 4 Mile Lane was entirely paved with CMAQ dollars, and that represents well over $1 million of that 1.7. And I believe the CMAQ program has been discontinued for Fremont County which is a good thing, because we're now no longer in a non-attainment area for air quality. So those dollars are just not available to us
Yeah.
anymore.
Except for we still have some dirt roads in town.
We still have some dirt roads. We didn't get them all done before the program expired.
We did?
Not quite. Missed one or two.
At least two.
Amy, they didn't get them done?
No comment.
A lot of dirt in the air today was at 15th between the highway and Main with the construction going on. I don't know if anybody noticed that besides me, but it was looked like the haboob in Arizona for a while.
Is that the fuel station
Yeah,
going
City
on?
Market
Oh,
fueling.
Yeah, so I
I
don't
did
know.
not see that today.
Anyone needs to put eyes on that, it was a mess.
This is my last one, so these are kind of just what I want to see us get done in the next horizon. Today, I would love if we all had a understanding walking away from here of what our priorities are for the next 3 to 4 years. Those may change. Like I said, we'll definitely be back a year from now to revisit that and make sure those are still the right things and still doing what this program needs to do. Curious if there's a yay or nay feeling from the council on continuing exploring that water financing program. Like I said, it takes a long time. Even if we start today, it's going to take us 1.5 years to get to a point where we can push those projects out. There's no commitment on our part to keep going. It's just a matter of, staff prioritizing, continuing to invest time in exploring that, or pivoting and looking for other options. In the little bit near-term window, but not today, we'll have to start figuring out our engineering for all these new projects really. But in particular, anything we're gonna try to get done yet this year is gonna have to move quick. The time frame to get anything actually built this year, it shrinks pretty quickly. So we'll wanna get plans out for bid in September or October for those, which leaves us just a month or two to put designs together. The nice part about the additional projects I proposed for '23 is the design is relatively light on those. We don't need a survey, we don't need anything like that to do that. We'll do a little bit of geotechnical work and just verify that that's the right fix, but that could come together quickly. We also, from a previous discussion, we need to, as a city, post an RFP to kind of revisit our engineering for the rest of this program. So that's on our list in that short term. I will mention we had a good discussion with CDOT earlier this week. We'll probably propose to do that as just I think they term it an on-call engineering contract, where it's, you go through the federally approved process and shortlist a number of engineering firms, and then you can kind of, as projects come up, you work from that short list and have them submit you a specific proposal for each and work from there. But that would allow us to use an engineer for that water financing program, just because of, if we want to recoup any of our engineering expenses for that water program, we need to make sure we follow federal rules and picking an engineer to help us with that from the start. So just trying to make sure it all falls into place.
Good.
And then a year from now, hopefully we're having the same discussion, talking about all the 24 projects under construction and just revisiting, the last 2 years that are out on there and making sure those are still the priority projects. And stormwater funding. Stormwater funding is really going to be something that we're going to have to work on today, 3-6 months from now, and a year from now, to make sure we can try to close that gap.
A couple of quick comments. I vote yes on the revolving water revolving fund, whatever it's called. And then I said before that I think Main Street between 7th and 9th is a priority, and I don't know if there's something short-term we need to do there while we look for the bigger money for everything that we want to do, or it's just, I hate to just see it in the condition it's in right now.
Understood. I'll make sure it gets added to that list for consideration, so we're thinking about it all the time. And like I said, we have pushed a couple of grant opportunities forward for that segment. They just haven't come together yet for us.
I'm expecting that there will be new rounds of the Main Street revitalization funds also from CDOT, and we do intend, if they come back, we do intend to apply again for that section of Main Street.
Is there anything that needs to be done between now and then, like, I don't know, chip sealing or something, or?
You can't chip seal a street that's that bad. It's like putting paint, like a fresh coat of paint on a siding of a house that's totally chipped, like totally.
Well, but I'm just, it's so deteriorated. I just wondered if there's something that we should be doing.
We can look at it. I don't have a set yes or no or answer for you right now, but I can definitely give it a second look, see what we can come up with.
Yeah, well, it'd be nice if there was something. It just seems like when it was done originally, it wasn't just, like 100-year water lines underneath. There's also a lot of flooding was happening on Main Street too, so there was a lot of changes that had to go there. And I'm guessing that those businesses are on that section want to see upgrades on their sidewalks and potentially mini bump outs or whatever. They feel like they are neglected and forgotten because they have not gotten the same upgrades as the rest of Main Street. And so it's more than just, let's, throw down a little something. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen with that, but it needs to happen.
It does.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, go ahead.
First off, apologies for coming in late. When I walked in, I said, I'm either really late or really early.
Oh, because the 6 o'clock?
Yes.
I had to double check on that.
Oh, dear. So I'm going to rewind here a little bit because I had a couple of questions that I did intend to ask. My first question is on slide 14, the 2A financial status. And we've got the debt service line on there, and remind me what that debt service represents, please.
Yeah, so the debt service, in order to get started as soon as this was passed in 2017, we had some interdepartment loan funds that went to 2A, and we amortized that over 10 years. So that is repaying the, I think it's the perpetual cemetery perpetual fund, and I think there's another fund, and I'm drawing a blank right now, but that's the debt service. So it was to allow us to start before we actually collected any sales tax dollars.
Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful. I remember that what our intentions were is to try to hit it hard first, and to do that, we needed to access the funds, because once 2A was passed, if we waited 3 or 4 years to accumulate all that capital, then people would be saying, hey, what happened to all that money?
Where's our tax money being used?
And the other comment I have is that right now we're evaluating streets based on the OCI index, right? Which is basically a measure of how good or how bad the street is. And I just wanted to use this opportunity to remind us all that with the East Highway 50 Access Control Plan, if CDOT is able to build out the previous plan, and that's of course up in the air right now because they're going to go through the process again. But if they implemented that plan, if that plan was being implemented, we would be seeing a lot of traffic on our side roads that are now carried either on Main Street or on Fremont Drive. And so I just wanted to point that out and to not let that slip off our radar, because when that does come, that's going to be another huge problem for us, because we've got a lot of roads there that are not paved full width and are pretty poorly paved, and we're going to be seeing a heck of a lot of traffic as a result of whatever CDOT does, is what my fear is. So we're not supposed to take counsel of our fears, but nonetheless, the CDOT is the agency that it is. And so that we just need to keep that in mind, and we're going to be looking at our multimodal transportation plan, and so there's some opportunity there, but nonetheless, you know, I'm pretty sure that we wouldn't be able to use 2A money for CDOT-driven improvements. Does that seem right to you, Ryan?
You know, I think it depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about repaving city streets as a result of an action that CDOT takes, that, you know, probably can use 2A money for that. I think it all comes down to where the priorities lie.
So it's just, this is really a question of priorities, and if we've got a horrible street, I mean, that really is the intent of the 2A money.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, especially, you know, there on that eastern corridor, some of those north-south routes, you know, they're in really bad shape.
Right.
You know, so, you know, there are priorities there, but, you know, right now they're local streets, and then, you know, in addition to the, you know, as we talked about earlier, in addition to the road condition, we also have to make sure that the infrastructure under the street's in good condition too before we go and pave them.
Exactly, yeah. Okay. I think that's all my comments. It is, but I just wanted to make those comments.
Looks like Amy has her hand up.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to go through my perspective on Director Evans's last page and just offer my thoughts on kind of the decision points that he had identified for today. First off, I just want to thank you for all of the hard work and thought that's clearly gone into this presentation, that's clearly gone into familiarizing yourself with our city and the details of many, many roads over the past 6 months that we've had you here. I really appreciate that the focus is clearly on those collector and arterial streets. I think it's really important that we are using our 2A dollars that we've been entrusted with to benefit the majority of Canyon citizens. And I think that we do that by ensuring that the roads that we're prioritizing are those that have the most traffic on them. So I really appreciate that. With that in mind, I am still concerned that we have some 2025 proposed roads that are local roads. And I would like us to make sure that we're using, again, our dollars on those collectors and arterials. With regard to the drinking water revolving fund, thank you so much for finding this program. I think it has a lot of potential. I do definitely want more info first, kind of what we talked through before with regard to how it would impact rates, and would definitely want that public input as well. On the 3 to 6 month plan, thank you so much for highlighting in particular that request for proposal for future engineering. I know that's one contract that we had been kind of extending and really appreciate the fact that we're taking that back out for competition and that you're prioritizing that. And then I just had one question. Could you give us a very quick rundown on kind of the status and the timeline of the current projects? I'm thinking of, in particular, North Reynolds, just kind of when we expect the projects that are ongoing to be wrapped up. Thank you.
Yeah, North Reynolds, they will be mobilizing tomorrow to start the cement treated stabilization, which is the next phase of the project. The first phase has really been dedicated towards getting the irrigation laterals piped and getting the clean out boxes in place. And they still have a little bit of work to do on that, but I would say they're probably 75% to 80% of the way done with that. So you'll see the base getting treated out there. That should, if it went really well, I would expect they'd be done with that road by the end of next week. And then curb and gutter will follow almost immediately after, and paving. So it's the type of project that it seems like it'll go really slow for a long time, and then it'll hopefully go really fast in this last little bit of it. We did award the work on College and Franklin to the same contractor that's doing Reynolds. So as their crew on Reynolds finishes up, their intention is to move them to Franklin. They expect they would start Franklin around the middle of August, and then College will probably be, I would say, at least 3 weeks after that, probably after Labor Day, that we'll see some road activity on College Avenue. I know the gas company is still out there finishing up their water main replacement, or their gas main replacement and services. And I think our water department finished up placing new main in a couple blocks at the west end there by 3rd. And I think they're also touching up services throughout that whole corridor, where we found a couple that were suspect and should get looked at before we build a new road on it. So there'll still be some activity there on College for the next couple weeks as well.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful. Do you have any particular plans in terms of public information sharing and ensuring folks know what to expect? I know folks really want their streets to be repaired, but then in the very short time period where it's going on, it can really prove challenging to daily life. Thanks.
We got to work on that. I don't have, we haven't done much with that yet. We've done some good work ahead of project starting, hosted open houses. The one on Reynolds was really well attended. We did one for College in Franklin that didn't draw quite the same success. So I think we've got some work to do improving our communication during the project and giving updates. So I will make a note of that, but I don't have an immediate solution for you.
Understood. Thank you.
So we should probably go through the rest of council to get your opinion on the DWRF formal application, if you'd like to move forward. Starting with Kathy, let's see a thumbs up.
I would think that'd be great to explore that further, and it's one of those as you hate to take down money, get money, and it's hard to get money. And with us being able to forgive part of the debt, to me, that's just fabulous. And so I think it's something to definitely explore and hopefully work through. And thank you for your work for doing that, because as you mentioned, it's not going to be easy.
It was easy because I'm familiar with the program, so
Yeah.
don't give me too much credit.
Lucky for us.
I had worked in it a
Lucky
lot.
for us, yeah. Emily, you were a thumbs up?
Yes, based on what I know, with the kind of caveats that Councilperson Schmischer added, yeah.
Absolutely, thumbs up on that.
Thumbs up, thumbs up.
Very good.
Do we need to talk about our feelings on College Avenue's 10-year mark within the sanitation district? If we want to keep that as a priority for a 2-inch overlay?
Oh, for Central?
Yeah, for Central.
Yeah, I guess I would like to know the council's opinion if we're okay. If we feel like Central is a high priority, that we should make some investment in it rather than waiting for all of the utilities to fall into place, which may, like I said, may take 10 years. or if we feel like we're okay making a moderate investment in Central and not building it all the way out, but making it better, knowing that it might get ripped up in pieces as the sanitation district does come into prioritizing
So
this.
when the sanitation comes, are they saying they're gonna do a little bit throughout the 10 years? Or are they
Yeah,
gonna wait for 10
I
years?
don't believe they would do the entire project at once. They would do it piece by piece, I would guess.
What
It's,
if
because
we-
it's over a mile, I think it's a 1.5 mile long segment-ish. It's a big piece.
What, well, if we didn't do college, what could we do? Could we do Main Street from 7th to 9th? Or Central, yeah, sorry, this is like my children. Could we do Central from Main Street?
You know, I
from
don't know that
7th
I
to 9th?
included
What
a,
could we do?
let me put together a cost estimate of Main Street. I would imagine 2 blocks of Main Street would not amount to a huge amount of money. The question would be, do we want to spend all the money on the streetscaping, bump outs, landscaping, those type of things get very expensive, or is it just repair the pavement of those 2 blocks of Main Street like we've done on a lot of the other 2A projects?
And I would say that if we're gonna do the additional streetscaping, that would need to come from general fund, not from 2A.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and Ryan mentioned there's other grant programs, or if revitalizing Main Street comes back, what we're doing or what we're proposing to do on the other segment of Main Street is to use the revitalizing Main Street dollars to do the sidewalks and the streetscape, and then use 2A dollars to actually rebuild the little piece of road that's
The little
left in the
piece.
middle to kind of combine them and make sure we get a whole project out of it. So if that program comes back, I mean, there's good precedent. We've already applied for this segment. You know, then I definitely think next year the discussion is, well, we need to prioritize some 2A dollars to make sure we can maintain that pavement and match the CDOT dollars.
So there's not a possibility as the sanitation does a segment of Central, right? That we couldn't just go behind them and fix it? Is that just economy of scale not?
I mean, we could.
Good for that.
I think the issue you run into is they may not even have the ability to start till the 2A program is expired. You know, they're not intending or able to start Central until, I think they said 26 or 27. You know, they've got work to do on these other projects and other projects within their district that are gonna take precedence. Central is on their radar, but it's not an immediate need for them, so.
I see that Central is budgeted at 1.6 million. I guess I wonder what our alternatives could be for something that's more permanent. That's my personal opinion. It gives me kind of the shudders to think of spending in $1.6 million and then just knowing 100% it's gonna be torn up. Amy, I see your hands up, and then we'll go through the rest of council.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Director Evans, I think you said in your presentation that Central wasn't in their 5-year capital plan. It sounds like we may just need to have a more detailed conversation with the sanitation district, because I definitely agree with the mayor in that if it is, if they are planning to start work on this in 2026 or even 6 years from now, I wouldn't be comfortable with, $1.6 million invested that will immediately be ripped up. However, if their plan really is 10 to 15 years from now to get started on it, and our expectation for a 2-inch overlay is a 10 to 15-year lifespan, then I don't necessarily see a conflict. I think we may just need more information from the sanitation district so that we can make a better informed decision. And I understand that they may not know that, and if they don't, that would also be helpful to know so that we can prioritize something else.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yep, we can gather that information from them, see what they'll be able to provide us in terms
Okay,
of.
thank you.
We wouldn't need to start anything immediately on Central Avenue today. It'd be nice to start to plan for it, but if that comes a little later, I think that's fine too.
Any other council members want to chime in on the Central Avenue possibility? Okay. Ryan?
Yeah, I guess I'd love to, get some feedback tonight on the proposed budget amendment for this year and 2-inch overlay for
Yeah.
the proposed streets that Leo laid out earlier today.
Getting to do 2 more streets than we thought? I mean, how awesome is that?
Yeah.
Kathy's got a big thumbs up. Emily?
Same.
Yeah. Mayor Pro Tem?
Since I wasn't here to hear that,
Okay.
I'm gonna abstain on that, but.
You can have a conversation with Leo
So-
afterwards. Tim and Andrea, why not? Yeah, thank you. We're excited for your new ideas, and resources and expertise that are already benefiting Canyon City, and this is, I don't know, I never thought I'd get so excited about streets, but I love it.
It looks like Councilmember Smither has her
Yes.
hand up again.
Amy?
All right, I just wanted to also chime in on the budget amendment question. Ryan, is that 1.5 million coming from anywhere in particular? Is it something that we won't be able to do, or is it just vacancy savings or other savings? If you could provide a little more illumination, I would love to also vote or give a thumbs up, thumbs down. Thanks.
So this is directly from the 2A funds, so this would be, projects that we would, try to fit into next year that we could do this year. So that, we've been seeing favorable pricing this year, and we want to strike while the iron's hot.
And the revenues
Okay,
are
awesome.
good.
So it's 2A money and we're just moving it forward a year. Then big thumbs up from me as well. Thank you.
All right. Anything else from council? All right, this meeting's adjourned.